Hey, kids, and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. I am your host, coming at you for the astrology for the week of September 19th through the 25th. And once again, I am in a vacuum, separate from producer Zoe, because ever since, and we're going to talk about Mercury this week because it's a Mercury kind of week, ever since Mercury began to station, before he turned around, my computer started to crash every time I tried to use the platform that I record these podcasts on. Actually, it started with one of my videos I do for Colette Baron Reed in her one of her circles. So, with Mercury in his, challenging posture, it's directly impacting my electronic experience, and it's actually pretty serious. So, I'm glad we have the option to do these recordings the way that I'm doing them today so that I can still bring you the podcast while I am figuring out why my very new and very expensive computer is acting up. But thank you, Mercury retrograde. So it is, in fact, a Mercury retrograde shenanigans kind of week because the three triple transits that Mercury's making that are really challenging all happen this week. There are like 5 different ways that Mercury is triggering the other planets as he moves and goes. 3 of them are what's called sesquicent squares. This is an angle of weak geometry. It can't make anything and it can't break anything, but it will alert you to either alignment that's out or a frustration that might be below the surface that's bothering you. I like to call the sesquicent square the itch, right? An itch tells you something's bothering you and it's sort of asking you to investigate, to scratch. So when it's Mercury and he's retrograde, the sesquicent squares are really a kind of yucky angle to have as part of a Mercury retrograde, because even if it was a passing a transit as Mercury is moving forward, a sesquicent square from Mercury to any planet is going to generate difficulties or frustrations in communicating, getting your point across, understanding the points of others, or just any sort of generalized way that communication can bring more friction than flow. That's the angle of the sesquicent square in action. So why this is particularly challenging in this Mercury retrograde is that Mercury is hitting Saturn in the sesquicent square and Uranus in the sesquicent square. So Saturn and Uranus were in a tight square all of 2021. So that's a conflict and obstacle geometry between Saturn, the teacher, and Uranus, the great awakener. Now, both Saturn and Uranus want similar things from us, right? Saturn is our inner wisdom, and his movement allows us to grow in our wisdom and to learn, to face our lessons and our karma and rise above it. Uranus wants us to wake up to higher levels of conscious awareness. That's why we call him the Great Awakener. So both of those things have similitude, wisdom and growth from Saturn, and higher levels of awareness and consciousness from Uranus, but they are holding a 90-degree angle geometry themselves. That's the geometry of conflict. Remember the floor and the wall, right? The floor and the wall are screaming at each other, and the floor is telling the wall to lie down, and the wall is saying, no, you stand up, and neither can win the argument, or the room, falls apart. So last year, this was a transit of exactness, and so there was a lot of lessons in waking up last year through conflict. Now, Saturn and Uranus are starting to separate in that geometry, but they're still pretty close to 90 degrees. It's not exact, but it's still close enough to be a square within what's called the orb of influence. The orb of influence just implies that a square is a square at 90 degrees but also at like 86 degrees or 93 or 4 degrees is still considered the conflict geometry of two energies sort of fighting for supremacy where neither one can actually win. And we have to somehow tolerate the friction and the cognitive dissonance when energies are fighting with each other like that. So during 2022, there have been huge swaths of time where other planetary placement or the movement of the moon, and in this case, Mercury, is reactivating that square between Saturn and Uranus. If you remember, we were talking about the fixed grand cross for the last 3 months because the nodes of the moon also in fixed signs have been making this square that made the last 2 or 3 months also filled with conflict and sudden unexpected events we had to grapple with. And that energy began to dissipate with the last lunar cycle. But Mercury is bringing all of that challenge front and center this week. So why this is interesting this week and what this has to do with Mercury's retrograde cycle is this is the week that Mercury is touching both Saturn and Uranus in this sesquisquare. In fact, it's a right now kind of thing. Saturn was hit by Mercury yesterday in this agitation, and Uranus is receiving it today. So that means today and yesterday are the probably the juiciest, diciest days of the Mercury retrograde cycle because these agitations are part of what we are struggling with or grappling with. And if you want some clues as to what might be, happening yesterday, today that you might be missing, look back to I'm going to say August 29th through September 1st. That's when these transits hit during the shadow period. So the sesquisquare with Uranus, which is a little bit more about freedom and rebellion and things, sort of happening very suddenly. That was the August 29th hit, and the exact retrograde moment is today. The sesquisquare with Saturn is more like the frustrations of delays or breakdowns or karmic lessons that you have to reckon with. And that's the energy that hit yesterday, but also on September 1st. So you can be general about this. Just think as August was becoming September, whatever challenges might have come up from the neck up for you during that little couple of day period is probably rearing its head again right now. And understand we will have yet a third wrap-up of any communication challenges that are part of this retrograde when Mercury turns around and does his direct shadow. We'll talk about that when we get there. Now, there's a very important aspect of every Mercury retrograde cycle that isn't about the triple transits or the agitations that you're probably in at the beginning of this week, but the coming together of Mercury moving backwards and the sun, which we call the inferior conjunction. This is something that happens at the exact midpoint of the retrograde cycle, like clockwork, every time. And it's called the inferior conjunction because the way the solar system is set up, Mercury only appears to be retrograde from our perspective when he's going to cross in front of the sun. So this conjunction looks like this: Earth, Mercury, the sun. Now, when Mercury is in his free and clear part of his cycle, where there is no retrograde in sight, he also conjuncts with the sun in what's called the superior conjunction. And he's on the other side of the sun during that. This one is special. Either one has conscious awareness and our thinking mind, which are not the same thing, together. Like conscious awareness is a sort of a greater abstract sense of I am aware of life around me. But thinking is the actual mechanism of narration that gets us through this mess. And of course, we are all overly reliant on our both our thinking and our intellectual orientation of this magnificent existence that is not intellectual in nature, but we have these minds that we have to use to figure out how to like not bump into the furniture. And when that planet, that narrating planet, is in the below, in the unconscious, moving backwards, important things are happening below the surface of our thought process, helping us like, rewire how we think, how we communicate, and how we perceive our world. Because Mercury's backward and sort of dipped into the unconscious, it's an incredible opportunity then when Mercury comes together with the sun. That's like a little dust up between Mercury in the below connecting with our conscious awareness, that we will be as aware as we move from Wednesday through Thursday and Friday of this week. We will be as aware as we can in a conscious way, the sun, the communication issues that we're grappling with below the surface to help change and shift our communication, thought patterns, and perceptions, Mercury. And so look for stuff to come up to show, reveal things to you. Mercury's a trickster, right? So things aren't always direct during Mercury's inferior conjunction. Sometimes the message we seek is going to come in a sideways kind of way through synchronicities or happy accidents or unconscious slips of the tongue or billboards you drive by or songs that come on the radio at just the right time. As you move through Thursday, particularly, but a little bit on Wednesday and Friday, just pay attention to things that surprise you about what you're thinking, how you're communicating with others, and notice if the trickster Mercury delivers any interesting information to you about your neck up experiences as we move through the second half of this week. Now, Thursday is also the autumnal equinox in the northern hemisphere, vernal equinox in the south, days and nights of equal length. So this Mercury Sun inferior conjunction happens in Libra. Just as the sun moves into Libra, Mercury's dropping through that 0 degrees of Libra, and the next day he'll drop back into Virgo, radically shifting how our Mercury retrograde process is sort of going to go and unfold and what we're going to be focused on with communication. But it is one of those sort of yummy synchronicities that something that's important for our thinking process and navigating our Mercury retrograde cycle is also joined up with our opportunity that all equinoxes bring to us, which is to have a consideration moment of just how whole, balanced, and integrated you feel or experience yourself at this time. When days and nights are of equal length, we are in balance and harmony in that sort of abstract way that life is a binary, masculine, feminine, day, night. So when darkness and lightness are both equal, we have an opportunity to perceive that in ourselves, to look for how balanced and whole we are. And the equinox is not a transit. It's not like it's going to reveal to you, how much might be lacking in your balance and wholeness. It's a moment when the solar system is saying, hey, look, we are actually always in balance and harmony between shadow and light, day and night. So we always have to remember that. So, of course, when the system is doing it, we don't have to remember it. We're in it. But it's just like when the day is longest and the night is shortest, we celebrate the light and remember the shadow. When the day is darkest and the light is shortest, we acknowledge the fallow periods and celebrate the light to come, like in the form of Christmas trees, Kwanzaa candles, or the Hanukkah menorah. Those are symbolic expressions, at least for us in the Northern Hemisphere, of light when it's dark. The equinoxes are when the system is in balance and wholeness. And I think it's a great idea in ritual consciousness, if you want to celebrate this, is to do something creative, ritual-like. I always suggest on the, when the sun moves into Libra and we're in that equinox up here in the north, it's time to pull out your mandala and do a little drawing creative ritual where the image reflects the wholeness and the balance and the wholeness that you either feel or wish to generate and create. There's something culminative, jeepers, I don't know what word I'm trying to say, but there's something fulsome about the autumnal equinox in the north, which is, I think, a little bit akin to like the full moon, right? Where the vernal equinox is like a new moon. Why? Because it's Sun in Aries, first cardinal fire sign, the astrological new year. So at that equinox, which is just as wholeness, balance, and completeness as this equinox, again, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, that equinox is where we begin again. So if that's the initiation moment, this equinox is like the harvest moment. That's why I don't have people doing mandalas at the Aries equinox, because it's about setting intentions to fire up in what you want to create in the astrological year to come. But in this equinox, which is like a harvest sort of moment, that's why I suggest the mandala as a ritual to sort of create a reflection of what you have generated so far in your year that reflects a kind of balance and wholeness and completeness as we move through this equinox. We ain't done. It's a big week. On Sunday, we move through the Libra new moon. So mid-afternoon Pacific time on Sunday the 25th, the Libra sun, newly in that mansion, just a few days after the equinox, will meet up with the moon, and we set intentions for our relationship desires. Now, this isn't just romantic relationships, although if that's part of what you are like looking to set intentions around, this is your new moon for love, romance, and connection. But Libra is also about how we meet the world, how we relate to the world itself. That everything is a mirror. That the things you see out there in your world are a direct reflection of the mental and emotional equivalent that you have of them. And this is what this new moon is all about. We set intentions to see a different world out reflected, in our landscape in front of us by virtue of making sure that we are dialed into all of the love and balance and harmony that we can muster on the inside of us. Because that's, of course, how we create beautiful, balanced, harmonious relationships on the outside of us. So it's just not about your dating life or your marriages. It's about what's the world you want to see reflected outside of you, and what shifts and changes in you have created a moment where you can intend something new. There's been a lot of emotional healing the last couple of months, courtesy of Venus's movement and Chiron, still holding that in conjunct, that great eliminator angle with the south node of the moon. So we're still releasing the wounds that block love. And since there's been so much excavation of that consciousness in the last couple of weeks and months, this is our new moon to say, all right, now that the heart space inside of us has been cleared out and cleaned of some, muck from the past, what new beautiful experiences am I ready to declare and intend by setting beautiful intentions in the archetype that can take the love you have inside of you and immediately turn into a reflection of loving experiences in your outside world simply by dialing into the intention setting possibility of this new moon. Now, this is a go big or go home kind of new moon because it's exactly opposing Jupiter, the planet of all bounty and abundance and prosperity and good fortune. Oppositions demand that something happens. These two energies have to either collide or crash or swerve or dance. And so it's a beautiful opportunity to, well, like I said, go big or go home. Like dial into how enthusiastic can you be about what good it is possible for you to see reflected in your outside world. Jupiter and the new moon opposing each other is saying, like, there is no limit. The only limit is, can you believe it in your heart? Can you align your mind with those belief feelings in your heart and keep that focus of mental and emotional equivalent going? This is a new moon that can bring beautiful results. Although all results are delayed at this point with both Mercury and Mars, in retrograde cycles. Now, while again, I don't want to overemphasize the romantic love portion of this new moon because, again, Libra is not about romance alone. It includes romantic connections and relationships. Libra is about all relating. However, it's not for nothing that the retrograding Mercury and Venus are coming together by a conjunction that is activated while this new moon hits. That's kind of amazing, guys. That means that our thinking mechanism, while visiting the territory below the surface of our consciousness, meets up with the planet of love. That alone offers some possibility of becoming more aware of how you relate to giving and receiving of love. And since Mercury's doing the backward motion right now, part of retrograding Mercury and Venus coming together offers insight into thought structures and patterns. Virgo's very much about thought structures and patterns that might block love or inhibit your ability to feel deserving of greater love. Right? And then a few days after this new moon hits, Venus herself will return to her home ruling planet of Libra, not planet, her home ruling side of Libra, sort of emphasizing that this week or so from the new moon on Sunday and the week that follows, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit in next week's podcast as well, because it'll be fresh, is this idea of deserving. Like, you can't have something you desire, kids, unless you feel like you deserve to have it. I talk about this a lot because as we heal the wounds of undeserving, love starts to show up everywhere. Like the love flowing through and in and out of your heart, that doesn't need any help. What needs help is the blocks to letting that love flow. And retrograding Mercury and Venus coming together will help a little bit. And then Venus moving into Libra in about a week's time will, after that new moon, will help as well. That little gathering that I'm making so much about of retrograding Mercury and Venus, they're trining Pluto when the new moon is exact. That's where the transformative power comes, where we really can dial in to intentions we have, desires we wish to create into manifested form for much, much more love in our experience. And then just trust that we're in these processes. Certainly Mercury and Mars in a process of retrograde these bunch of months is going to leave us very changed. That retrograding Mercury coming together with Venus while the new moon is hitting will absolutely instigate experiences of opening our hearts more by finding the thought patterns that keep our hearts closed. And we want to remember all of this as we're setting intentions when we come up to this coming weekend on Sunday. And let that new moon bring you more love than you could ever imagine, because it's out there to be experienced. Have at it, kids.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Our email in Dreamer is Sharon or Sharon. And okay, Sharon writes in, I had
I like the giggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of funny. So she says, I had an odd, unforgettable dream snippet last night, which I appreciate she's admitting to the snippet, because I sometimes have nights of like 4 snippets of totally different dreams.
No, in fact, what I love about the snippet consciousness is that sometimes that's all we remember, and so that's what we get to work with.
Right.
And so for me, the fantasy is that your unconscious doesn't give a shit about the rest of the dream, but remember this image.
Yeah, just a snippet.
Yeah, just a snippet.
Okay, she says, I was in movement, walking fast. Other unseen but sensed entities were going with me down this hallway. It was dusky or shadowy, no fear or bad feelings. I stated quite firmly, I am the Queen of Belgium. I can do what I want.
Whoa, wait a minute. What?
That's the gag. That's the first gag. Okay, I am the Queen of Belgium. I can do what I want. This was meant in a financial way. I had a feeling of relief. Everything is going to be okay. That's the financial thing is what was interesting to me. So she continues on. She says, then I woke up with a major WTF feeling. I have no ancestral... Right. So she says, I have no ancestral connection to Belgium, nor any real interest, ever. I mean, like Belgium chocolate, Belgian horses are the extent of my knowledge. I've had to Google what they are, even monarchical-wise. You know, like what is the monarchy in Belgium?
Yeah, right. Like I'm sitting here thinking the same thing. It's like I want to be a brilliant dream interpreter in this moment, but in some ways I'd have to have some knowledge of Belgium that I don't have.
Yeah, so she says she had to Google it. On a personal level, for some time, I've been trying to manifest some major move out of state and start a new life money. I know this is part of it, but Queen of Belgium, and then we have 3 question marks. Thanks for your time, Sharon.
Wow. Well, first of all, I like knowing that that she's making a connection between the financial, message of the dream and something very specific, about her own life. That's helpful. So like I'm literally, as we're sitting here doing this podcast, Zoe, I'm sitting here on Wikipedia.
Okay.
Looking at Belgium, and it's like, what? Oh my goodness. History, antiquity, Middle Ages. Like
I would assume their monarchy hasn't been in power for at least 100 years. Like, I assume they're just figures.
Yeah, there was a revolution that separated them from the Netherlands. It's funny. Like one of the things that's coming up, this is interesting, Zoe. Like we're already sort of in the interpretation of Belgium by the fact that we know it's a country, but we don't it ain't France, right? But it's like France. They're near France, and they speak French, and they eat pommes frites, right?
Right.
So there might be something in there about a kind of right-sizedness, like I'm Queen of Belgium as opposed to like I'm Queen of the world. It's like there's that hits me a little bit about the Belgium piece. That that being the queen of any country is an aspirational declaration in the dream, and it does put her in sovereignty, control. She can do what she wants, as she says in the dream. And since her waking life is demanding that she have some kind of sovereignty power and ability to marshal resources, being the queen of a country would be helpful. But maybe it's Belgium in her dream and not some, larger, player in the world to represent a kind of right-sizedness or a lack of, pretentiousness or hubris. I'm sorry. I hope nobody's listening from Belgium and thinking that we're bashing Belgium. And the other thing I want to say about this is just in terms of like how dream work works. Like if you come to me to interpret a dream, I'm going to give you an interpretation based on my gift for landing on an interpretation. And then that winds up looking like what dream work ought to look like. But that's only dream work with me, right? And therapists and psychologists are trained like deeply and profoundly not to do what I do.
Oh, okay.
So I want to just sort of say that, for Sharon, when you're thinking about Belgium, I've given you the best thing I can grab in this sort of moment about why maybe Belgium. But what a wonderful rabbit hole to maybe go down, to see if you can't get something more about Belgium. But just being the queen of a sovereign nation in the dream relates to a dream that's asking Sharon to own her capacity to create anything she desires, right? And then she says that in the waking life, she has something she wants to create.
Right, and she said that she felt like she made that statement financially.
Right. She's like, her unconscious is clearly, giving her lots of subtle information about what this sovereignty is to be directed towards in her waking life. So then we go back to the beginning of the dream and we can add some more layers of understanding what this dream is reflecting.
Right.
The very first thing she says is she's in motion, right? So that tells us that the thing that she's considering is a process that's already started. Even the hallway suggests that, because the hallways are a symbol of transition, right? She's not in the destination or in the room, she's in the hallway, right? So that matches the sort of waking life perspective of what this dream might be reflecting. The entities, she doesn't describe whether those feel like they're supportive or negating, but let's just say that they are a reflection that she's being guided, that she's got energetic support. And the shadowiness of that image is not lost to me either. So it is a kind of shadow dream, but she's not deterred. Right? She's moving through this hallway undeterred, though it's a kind of shadowy place. So that actually makes me trust, the message of the dream, because it comes from in the explorations of the shadow as she's moving fast in this thing that's already moving forward in her waking life and being supported by spirit. She comes to the other side of this awareness with this sovereignty declaration. I'm the Queen of Belgium. I can create what I want. And isn't that true? We are all capable of creating everything we want, but not unless we own our own sovereignty to do so.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.